Hey, this is the Entertainment Advice Channel. What I want to talk about today is a topic of how to write a story. So for this video, I'm going to give a very basic um, introduction on how to become good at storytelling. If you want to start writing stories, okay, in a simple and straightforward way so anyone can understand it, okay? So now I mention that, let's get started. So when it comes to writing a story, okay, which of course would make sense since now we live in an age where everyone talks about the quality of entertainment, and of course, movies being one of them is included, you know, has gone down, for that matter, okay? Um, the truth of the matter is one of the best ways, of course, to improve that is to do it for yourself, okay? And when it comes to, of course, um, doing anything for that matter, you have to get started with the very basics. And that is what I'm going to be discussing for this video. And one of the first basics, if you want to, of course, become good at writing a story, is to first and foremost realize that the best way to do it is to make it as efficient and effective as possible instead of tiresome and boring, like it tends to actually be for most people, okay, when they write a story, especially as a beginner, okay? And the first way to make that happen is to have something referred to as a reference sheet. And a reference sheet is definitely what is needed if you want to make storytelling a lot easier for that matter, okay? Because a reference sheet makes it a lot easier for someone to, of course, write a story without having to just sit there and having to like squeeze their brain, in other words, thinking very hard, like they're squeezing an orange, for something to, of course, happen, okay? And that's the truth of the matter, okay? Reference sheet makes it easier because it gives you a suggestion of a lot of things you can do. Whether it could be like if you're writing a story about a particular setting that's going to happen, having a reference sheet makes your life a million times easier. Like, do I want to write a story about the samurai? Like for example, if I'm talking about ancient history, do I want to write a story about the medieval knights of Europe? Do I want to write a story about ancient China, or anything for that matter? A reference sheet makes it instantaneously easier for you to come up with an idea because everything you can pretty much imagine, whether it could be the setting to what is the point of the story. Like, for example, like, is the story about trying to rescue someone? Is the story about revenge or anything like that? Like, in other words, of course, like what the plot of the story is, like whatever you can imagine, whether it is setting, plot, um, you know, location, like specific location, like where does it take place at? It might take place in, like, for example, medieval Europe, but where specifically does it take place? Or and anything for that matter you can think of, it makes it instantaneously easier for you to come up with an idea without having to suffer, and not just suffer, but suffer immensely, to be quite blunt and honest with you, okay? That is the truth of the matter, to put it bluntly, okay? That is the honest truth. So, of course, if you do those particular things, you will realize quickly, you know what? Things are actually becoming a lot easier. When it comes to, of course, coming up with a story instead of suffering. Not to mention, you can always add more things in, more suggestions, in other words, for that matter, okay? You might say the setting, is these particular things, and then you add more suggestions based on obviously the amount of overall suggestions you want to have to make your life a lot easier, okay? That is the truth of the matter. It is very effective when it comes to teaching you how to, of course, make your stories a lot easier to make instead of having to suffer for like 40 minutes to an hour to come up with a single a single story idea. Okay, it makes your job a lot easier. Okay, it's still hard making a story, of course, but it definitely makes it a lot easier for that matter. Okay, and that's the truth of the matter. So that's my first point. Okay, the second point, when it comes to learning how to become better at actually writing a story, if you want to become better, is to simply realize this thing that's extremely important that people tend to overlook all the time, is that you have to visualize your storyline ideas in your head. Okay, this is definitely a big one that people tend to miss all the time, is that you have to actually, use your imagination to come up with one. People might say wouldn't it make more sense to just create the story as you go along, but that's actually horrible advice, okay? Because when you visualize a story idea in your head, the truth of the matter is it encourages the greatest creativity. It not only gives you the ability to, of course, foresee what's going to happen in advance before it actually happens more easily, of course, it also gives you the ability to come up with the best ideas. And in other words, the most original ideas instead of course, having to, just kind of come up with a story as you go along, which of course will make it more likely to be boring and generic. I know a lot of people might still not understand what I'm saying, but trust me, when it comes to originality, absolutely, undeniably, visualization is better to do. It helps you come up with more original ideas instead of just something that's generic. Okay, it's just something that I've noticed works. Okay, because I have noticed that about a lot of creative skills is that the best ideas usually come when you imagine it. Okay, because when you imagine it, it makes it more likely that it will be distinct. Okay, instead of something that's just another generic idea that someone else has done before, which of course in the field of storylines, storytelling, in other words, you know, the skill that you use to make things like movies, TV shows, even video games and stuff like that, the truth of the matter is, um, of course, visualization just makes your life a lot easier because your ideas are more distinct instead of just being just generic stuff that you've heard and seen a million times, especially like I was getting at before in a field of work that is known for um, wanting to go against something known as cliches, which means coming up with the same idea that someone has already come up with before. Okay, that is the truth of the matter, which of course you want to avoid cliches if you want your story to be memorable, and not just memorable, but as popular as possible. Okay, avoiding cliches is the most important thing you have to do, and that's the truth of the matter. So that's my second point. And my third and the last point, undeniably, that is very true, is to have a better mindset. Now, this one, of course, I know people are going to overlook this one and say, oh, this one is so trivial. This is so stupid. This is so silly. This sounds like those corny ass, Eastern mysticism crap. But no, this is actually a very important thing you have to do. And the reason why I say that is having a mindset when it comes to becoming good at a skill like storytelling, let alone any other skill, is extremely important. And if anything, I would even argue is the most important thing to focus on. Okay, because the truth of the matter is, when you have a better mindset, it makes it easier for you to actually create a story without experiencing burnout, which is a common thing across all skills where people practice and then they get tired of practicing because they find it too hard and stuff and they just give up. And one of the biggest ways to give up is they make excuses, like, oh, I lost interest, or oh, well, I have other things to do, or maybe I'll work on it eventually later on. The cliche excuses you always make for yourself. The truth of the matter is, when you work on something like this, it makes your life, a life a lot easier, okay, when it comes to having a better mindset, okay? And what specifically, of course, do you think of for mindset? The best way to thing, I should say, to think of, when it comes to having a better mindset, is to first and foremost focus on the way of thinking where you think this is the one thing I want to do, okay, with my life, okay? Whether for the rest of your entire life or at least for a period of time, okay? Thinking I only have to become good at this one thing, um, this, of course, thing for that matter, is the best way to think if you want to actually not to get overwhelmed, okay? Because the more the human brain actually focuses on one thing for that matter, we tend to usually do better. And history has shown us numerous times, okay? For that matter, okay? To be quite honest with you, let alone evolution, has proved this to be true, okay? Human evolution studies, okay? The more we teach ourselves, just focus on becoming good at one thing, the more likely we will actually believe we can do it. And the more we believe we can do it, the more likely we will actually see success doing it for that matter. Okay. And not just become good at it, but become really good at it. And to add to that as well, another thing to add to that, just one more thing to add to it, is also teaching yourself to think in the long run. Okay. Instead of basing results, you know, in the short run when it comes to how much your ability to write a story is improving. So that is the truth of the matter. So anyway, this is my video. So all I have to say left is that I hope you enjoyed it. I will eventually cover more discussing this for my channel when it comes to how to write a story in greater detail. And that is all I have to say, and simply put it, I'm out. So bye.